Hello everyone. This is my week 2 assignment research case study presentation and my name is Chris Arneson. The first case that I would like to discuss this week is New York Times Company v. Sullivan. In the New York Times Company v. Sullivan, who are the parties involved? The plaintiff is or was one of 3 commissioners of Montgomery, Alabama, and the defendant is New York Times Company. What facts led to the dispute in this case? The New York Times Company published an advertisement entitled "Heed Their Rising Voices" that depicted an unprecedented wave of terror had been directed against those who participated in the civil rights movement in the South. New York Times Company did not check the accuracy of the advertisement and made the decision to publish due to having no evidence that any of the ad was false. The decision in the case was awarded the plaintiff $500,000 for the defamation case. The defendant appealed the ruling. In the New York Times Company v. Sullivan, why did Sullivan feel his reputation was damaged by the New York Times publication? The advertisement included statements about police action to be taken directly towards the students that had been involved themselves in the civil rights demonstration and the leader of the movement for his involvement in the demonstration. Sullivan said the advertisement implied his involvement due to Sullivan's responsibilities of supervising the police department while a commissioner. The statements made in the advertisement would cause readers to inherently view Sullivan as the "they" in the advertisement that it was referred to. In the New York Times Company v. Sullivan, what are the elements of defamation? The elements of defamation in this case were the negative comments about police action that was to be taken against protesters, as well as others involving the civil rights movement. Since Sullivan was a public official, what did he have to prove in this case? Sullivan had to prove that the comments were made knowing that the facts were false and the comments were made with malice intent. What was the Supreme Court's ruling? The Supreme Court ruled that the comments were not made with malice intent and that the freedom of speech allowed for criticism of public officials What was the Supreme Court's ruling? Why did they make that ruling? The Supreme Court made that ruling because that is what the law reads. In the next case that we discussed or read this week, Gertz v. Welch. In the case Gertz v. Welch, who were the parties involved in the case? Elmer Gertz was an attorney that was hired by the family of a murder victim to represent them in a case against the police officer in a civil litigation against the officer. Welch is a magazine publisher that published opinions based on a particular society's views and beliefs. Was the petitioner a private person or a public figure? In this case, Elmer Gertz is a private person. He held previous positions as a public figure, but according to the case, none of his previous positions are considered relevant. What were the alleged defamatory statements about Gertz in the American Opinion article? The article accused Gertz of being a communist supporter that framed the police officer in the murder trial to help instigate a communist stand against Chicago police. In the case Gertz versus Welch, what was done to confirm the accuracy of these allegations against Gertz? In the case Gertz versus Welch, the publisher Welch made no attempts to validate or verify any of the information that was published. How do you think these allegations affected Gertz's reputation? I feel that these allegations would have a substantial impact on Gertz's career as an attorney. An attorney is an occupation that individuals put a large amount of consideration into before choosing. If I were researching an attorney and found articles that were accusing them of the same things Gertz was being accused of, I personally would not hire them. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this way. What would you have done differently than Welch to avoid the lawsuit? I do not know that the lawsuit was avoidable. The statements made were based on the beliefs of the editor and the society he belonged to, and subsequently, there were the views they wanted to publish. I suppose to reiterate that they were opinions and not entirely factual, but that would be less influential on the readers. Gertz versus Welch. What is your state's defamation law? In the state of Nebraska, Nebraska law states for defamation, the plaintiff must prove that the defendant knowingly 1. Made a false statement of fact, 2. Which caused financial or reputational harm, and 3. Acted either negligently or with actual malice. How can you relate what you learned from the Sullivan and Gertz cases to your future work in the communications industry? I feel it will help me by understanding that what is reported will have an impact on the lives of others. If I choose to report false information, the likelihood is that I probably will end up being involved in a similar case. I feel it is a moral decision to report factual information to your audience, and that should be made by everybody. That is my presentation for week 2. I would like to thank you and have a good night.